The steel hull creaked under the immense pressure as the USS Ellison glided through the dark, frigid waters of the North Atlantic. Inside the control room, a tense silence hung in the air. Red emergency lights bathed the narrow corridors, giving the submarine an almost eerie glow. Commander Sullivan stood at the control panel, his presence imposing yet calm, a silhouette against the glow of the sonar screen. Sullivan was a seasoned veteran. 18 years under the sea had shaped him into a leader who rarely raised his voice but commanded unwavering respect. With his hands clasped behind his back, he monitored the sonar screen, eyes darting between the readings and the crew. At the far side of the room, Seaman Brooks fumbled with the communication console, his fingers trembling slightly. Just 19, Brooks had joined the submarine crew straight out of basic training. Full of confidence and pride, he often spoke of his desire to prove himself as more than just a rookie. But today, his hands were unsteady, a sharp contrast to the bravado he usually displayed. "Status report," Sullivan called out, his voice even, cutting through the tension like a blade. "All systems nominal, sir," answered Chief Petty Officer Grant, standing beside the navigation console. Silent drill underway, awaiting final confirmation. Brooks glanced at the control panel in front of him. He was responsible for maintaining communications during the silent drill, a simulation where the entire submarine would go dark and silent, mimicking a stealth approach behind enemy lines. It was the most crucial part of training, requiring absolute precision. The speakers crackled suddenly, and an unexpected transmission came through. Brooks had forgotten to switch off the external comms, breaking the primary rule of the drill. The sound reverberated through the vessel like a gunshot, and everyone froze. Sullivan's piercing gaze shifted to Brooks. "Seaman," he said calmly, but with a steel edge, "did you just transmit during a silent drill?" Brooks swallowed hard. I thought I had it muted, sir." The commander's expression remained unchanged. "And yet, the entire vessel just heard your mistake. Do you realize what that would mean in an actual operation?" Brooks opened his mouth, but couldn't find the words. His confidence had drained, replaced by a deep, gnawing regret. Around him, other sailors exchanged worried glances. They all knew that mistakes like this could cost lives if they were under real enemy threat. Sullivan didn't raise his voice, but his words carried a weight heavier than the ocean above them. "In this submarine, we don't guess. We know. One misstep, and we risk 134 souls." Brooks lowered his head, his face flushed with shame. The drill resumed, but the tension remained. Commander Sullivan continued his inspection, not once breaking his stern demeanor. A few minutes later, the control room doors slid open and Lieutenant Harper stepped inside, having heard the commotion. Sullivan gave a brief nod, indicating that the situation was under control. Harper, a reliable second-in-command, exchanged a quick glance with Brooks, who was still at his post, visibly shaken. After the drill concluded, Sullivan addressed the crew, his tone unwavering. "Mistakes happen. They are part of learning. But in this environment, mistakes must never become habits. Brooks, after we surface, report to the sonar room. You'll spend the next 2 shifts auditing communication." "Protocols." Brooks nodded, barely able to look the commander in the eye. He had been let off with a duty shift, a minor penalty compared to what he feared. The crew dispersed, but the lesson lingered in the air. Sullivan knew that fear could breed recklessness, and recklessness was a luxury they couldn't afford. He approached Brooks, who was double-checking the control panel, his hand steadier this time. "Son," Sullivan said quietly, "this boat's not a place to prove your worth. It's a place to earn it." Brooks nodded, forcing a small, grateful smile. "Yes, sir." The hum of the submarine systems resumed, steady and unbroken, as the USS Ellison moved deeper into the Atlantic, the crew now more vigilant than ever. As the USS Ellison continued its silent journey through the frigid depths of the North Atlantic, the atmosphere remained tense. The crew had returned to their stations, each man aware that the margin for error aboard a nuclear submarine was thinner than the steel walls surrounding them. Every decision, every movement, every whispered command held the weight of 134 lives. Seaman Brooks, still reeling from his earlier mistake, sat at his station in the communications bay. His heart pounded as he reviewed the protocols he had violated. He could feel the eyes of his crewmates on him, a silent judgment that cut deeper than any reprimand. He knew that regaining their trust would require more than just a shift in the sonar room. Commander Sullivan paced the control room, his eyes scanning the various readouts on the consoles. He had seen promising sailors crack under the weight of their first major mistake, and he wasn't about to let Brooks become another cautionary tale. But he also knew that discipline on a submarine was more than just rules. It was a way of life. "Sir, contact bearing 015, called out Petty Officer Ramirez from the sonar station, breaking the uneasy silence. "Possible Russian sub, running deep." Sullivan's sharp blue eyes narrowed. He moved quickly to Ramirez's side, studying the faint rhythmic blips on the screen. It was subtle, just a whisper beneath the ambient noise of the ocean, but unmistakable. "How close?" Sullivan asked, his voice low. "Approximately 2,000 yards and closing, sir. Running silent. They haven't pinged us yet, but they're definitely in our water." Sullivan's jaw tightened. This was no drill. The stakes had just escalated, and every man on board knew it. They were now in a silent, underwater chess match with a potential adversary, a game where a single mistake could ignite an international incident. "Maintain silent running," Sullivan ordered. "Reduce speed to 1/3. Let's make ourselves a ghost." The command echoed through the control room, and the crew sprang into action. The lights dimmed to a deep, muted red as the submarine's engines slowed, reducing their acoustic signature. The creaking of the hull grew quieter, blending seamlessly into the ambient noise of the deep ocean. Brooks, still shaken from his earlier error, felt a fresh wave of fear wash over him. This was the real thing, a potential confrontation with an enemy sub. His hands trembled as he double-checked the communication lines, ensuring every circuit was secure. He couldn't afford another mistake, not now. "Sir, I'm picking up another contact," Ramirez whispered, his voice tense. "Smaller, faster, possibly an escort." Sullivan's mind raced. This wasn't just a rogue sub wandering too close. It was likely part of a patrol group, possibly a hunter-killer team designed to flush out and engage enemy subs. If they had been detected, the situation could escalate quickly. "Lieutenant Harper," Sullivan said, keeping his voice steady, "prepare countermeasures and ready the torpedo tubes. I want options if this turns into a standoff." Harper gave a curt nod, his face set with the calm determination of a seasoned officer. "Aye, sir." As the crew worked in near silence, Brooks felt the crushing weight of his earlier mistake press down on him. He could still hear Sullivan's words echoing in his mind. "In this submarine, we don't guess, we know." The young seaman glanced at the control panel, his fingers hovering over the switches and dials. He couldn't afford another error, not with a hostile sub closing in. Suddenly, the sonar screen lit up with a burst of activity. The Russian sub had shifted course, now angling directly toward the Ellison. Brooks's heart raced. He glanced at the commander, whose face remained unreadable, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Brace for possible contact," Sullivan said, his voice steady but firm. "We hold position. Let them make the first move." The tension in the control room was palpable, each crew member frozen in place, their breath held as the seconds ticked by. The Russian sub's signal grew louder, the distance between them closing rapidly. Brooks tightened his grip on the console, his mind racing through every possible scenario. He had to redeem himself, prove that he wasn't just a liability. He forced his breathing to slow, his mind to clear. This was his chance to regain the respect he had lost. Suddenly, the Russian sub's signal shifted again, veering sharply to starboard. It had detected another contact, possibly a decoy or a natural anomaly, and was moving away. The relief in the control room was palpable, but Sullivan's eyes remained locked on the sonar screen. "Maintain silent running," he whispered. "We're not out of this yet." Brooks let out a shaky breath, his pulse still racing. He had narrowly avoided another mistake, but the lesson was clear. There were no second chances at 500 feet below the surface. As the submarine continued its cautious descent into the deep, Brooks silently vowed to never let fear cloud his judgment again. He had been given a second chance, and he intended to earn it. As the USS Ellison continued its cautious glide through the dark Atlantic depths, the tension among the crew remained palpable. The Russian submarine had moved out of direct line, but the risk of detection was far from over. Every sailor knew that a single slip could turn their silent patrol into a high-stakes confrontation. Seaman Brooks sat at his station, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the control panel. The weight of his earlier mistake still clung to him, a shadow he couldn't shake. He had replayed the moment over and over in his mind, each time realizing just how close he had come to putting his entire crew in jeopardy. Lieutenant Harper moved quietly through the control room, his sharp eyes inspecting each console, each crew member, ensuring no one had let their guard down. He stopped beside Brooks, his gaze lingering for a moment. Without a word, he placed a firm hand on the young sailor's shoulder, a silent reminder to stay sharp. "Status report," Commander Sullivan's voice cut through the tense silence, steady and commanding. "Maintaining course at 500 feet, Harper replied, his voice calm but alert. "The Russian sub has shifted course, but it's still within striking distance." "We're not clear yet," Sullivan nodded, his gaze never leaving the sonar screen. He had been through enough underwater standoffs to know that the most dangerous moment wasn't when the enemy first appeared, but when they slipped back into the darkness, potentially waiting to strike. Brooks forced himself to focus, his fingers moving over the controls with a newfound caution. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice, not with the lives of 134 crewmates on the line. His training had drilled this into him, but the reality of it only hit home when he nearly compromised the mission. "Incoming signal," Ramirez whispered from the sonar station, his voice tense. "Possible active ping, bearing 010. They might be trying to flush us out." Sullivan's eyes narrowed, his mind quickly calculating their options. An active ping meant the Russian sub was actively searching, possibly suspicious of their presence. They couldn't afford to break silence, but neither could they risk being cornered. "Prepare to deploy countermeasures," Sullivan said quietly, his voice barely a whisper but carrying the weight of a direct order. "We may have to draw their attention elsewhere." Brooks felt his pulse quicken, his mind racing through the training scenarios he had studied. He reached for the console, his fingers hovering over the controls for the decoy launch system. This was his chance to make up for his earlier error. "Steady, Brooks," Harper whispered beside him, sensing the young sailor's nerves. "One mistake at a time. Just breathe." Brooks exhaled slowly, his fingers finally finding the right switches. He activated the decoy system, sending a small, noise-generating device into the water designed to mimic the acoustic signature of the Ellison. The decoy shot away from the sub, its tiny motors whirring as it sank deeper into the darkness. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. The crew remained frozen, ears straining to catch any hint of the Russian sub's response. Then, the sonar. Console crackled softly as the decoy began broadcasting, sending out a carefully calibrated series of sounds designed to lure the enemy away. The Russian sub took the bait. Its signal shifted, moving sharply away from the Ellison as it chased the false target. The relief in the control room was almost tangible, a collective exhale as the threat passed. Sullivan leaned closer to the sonar screen, his eyes tracking the Russian sub's movements. He allowed himself a brief, satisfied nod before turning back to his crew. "Well done," he said quietly, his gaze settling on Brooks. "Crisis averted, for now. Let's not get complacent." Brooks felt a wave of relief wash over him, his heart still pounding but his confidence slowly returning. He had redeemed himself, if only partially, and the look of quiet approval from his commander meant more than he could express. As the USS Ellison continued its silent voyage deeper into the Atlantic, Brooks silently promised himself that he would never again let fear cloud his judgment. He had been given a second chance, and he intended to make it count. As the USS Ellison continued its silent patrol deep beneath the Atlantic, the tension in the control room reached its peak. The Russian submarine had veered off, but the danger was far from over. Every sailor knew that a single miscalculation could still lead to disaster. Commander Sullivan stood near the sonar console, his eyes never leaving the flickering screen. The Russian sub had passed dangerously close, and any sudden movement or noise could bring it back. The crew worked in near-perfect silence, the only sounds being the soft hum of the reactor and the occasional creak of the hull as the immense water pressure shifted. Seaman Brooks, still shaken from his earlier mistake, sat at his post, his fingers now steady on the controls. He had learned his lesson, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like the ocean above them. His earlier arrogance had been replaced with a focused determination not to let his crewmates down again. "Lieutenant Harper," Sullivan whispered, moving closer to his second-in-command. "Prepare to deploy countermeasures if necessary. We're not risking a second pass." Harper nodded, his face a mask of concentration. He quickly relayed the command to the weapons officers, his voice barely above a whisper. They moved swiftly, loading the tubes with decoys designed to confuse enemy sonar if they came under direct threat. Suddenly, a faint ping echoed through the hull, the sound traveling through the submarine like a ghostly ripple. The Russian sub had sent out a sonar pulse, a probing signal that could reveal their position if they weren't careful. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Hold your positions," he said, his voice barely audible. "No sudden movements." The crew froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. Brooks felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple, his eyes locked on the control panel as he silently counted the seconds. He forced his breathing to slow, his hands gripping the edge of the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. Another ping. Closer this time. Sullivan's mind raced. They couldn't afford to engage. An underwater firefight would not only risk their lives, but could also spark a broader conflict. They had to remain a ghost, unseen and unheard, in the depths of the ocean. Then, without warning, the Russian sub's signal abruptly shifted. It had detected something else. Perhaps a false echo or a decoy, pulling its attention away from the Ellison. The crew remained motionless, their breaths shallow, as the hostile sub slowly drifted out of their sonar range. Sullivan allowed himself a slow, measured exhale. They had avoided a direct confrontation, but the danger hadn't fully passed. He motioned to Harper, who quickly adjusted the controls, guiding the Ellison deeper into the Atlantic, putting more distance between them and their potential adversary. As the tension in the control room slowly eased, Brooks felt his muscles unclench. He had survived his first real encounter with an enemy sub, but the experience had left a deep impression. He glanced at Commander Sullivan, whose face remained as calm and composed as ever, the mark of a true leader. Once the Russian sub was safely out of range, Sullivan turned to face his crew, his voice low but firm. "We maintain silent running until we're clear of this sector. No mistakes. Understood?" A chorus of quiet affirmations echoed through the control room, each sailor reaffirming their commitment to the mission. Sullivan locked eyes with Brooks for a brief moment, offering a slight nod of approval. The young seaman felt a surge of pride, a small but significant step toward earning his place among the crew. For the next few hours, the Ellison crept deeper into the Atlantic, the crew operating in near-perfect synchronization. Every console click, every whispered command, every steady breath was a testament to the discipline and professionalism that kept them alive in the unforgiving depths. As they finally reached a safer part of the ocean, Sullivan leaned back against the bulkhead, allowing himself a rare moment of reflection. He had seen young sailors break under the pressure of command, but Brooks had shown the potential for growth, a rare quality in the high-stakes world of submarine warfare. Before leaving the control room, Sullivan approached Brooks, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You did well today," he said quietly. "Remember this moment. Discipline and courage are what keep us alive down here." Brooks straightened, his chest swelling with pride. "Thank you, sir. I won't forget it." Sullivan gave a small nod, his eyes reflecting a quiet respect. "Good. Now get some rest. We'll need sharp minds when we surface." As the commander walked away, the control room settled into a steady rhythm once more, the crew moving with renewed focus and determination. The USS Ellison continued its silent journey, a ghost in the depths, every sailor aboard bound by the unspoken code of trust and discipline that defined their world. As the scene fades, the narrator's voice returns, delivering a powerful message. On land, mistakes are lessons. Underwater, mistakes can be death sentences. Discipline in the Navy isn't optional, it's oxygen. What would you have done in Commander Sullivan's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another deep-sea lesson from Authority Watch.